With this fundamental law, Francis has now launched the true start of his reform. He's putting the poor at the center, that is, the divorced and remarried who have been held at arm's length, and asking for the bishops to have a true change of heart.
Even within the Church, there are those who would obscure the truth of the indissolubility of marriage in the name of mercy, who would condone the violation of the conjugal union by means of contraception in the name of pastoral understanding, and who, in the name of tolerance, would remain silent about the attack on the very integrity of marriage as the union of one man and one woman.
Welcome back to The World Over. That was Cardinal Raymond Burke speaking at Franciscan University in Steubenville about the upcoming Synod on the Family. Before him was Monsignor Pio Vito Pinto, the head of the Roman Rota, at the Vatican press conference announcing Pope Francis's changes to this annulment process. Do the new rules affect the indissolubility of marriage? And how will the streamlined procedures be applied at the diocesan level? Here to weigh in on all of it, we are joined by Bishop Robert Morlino via satellite from Madison, Wisconsin. Bishop Morlino, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Raymond. As you're looking at me, I hope I don't look too fat.
Oh, come on, stop it. Let's talk about this power of nullity that has been extended to you and your brother bishops. The Pope is obviously delegating this authority now to you, at times in lieu of the judicial process that was in place before. How radical a change is this, and are you comfortable accepting this level of responsibility as a diocesan bishop?
Well, let me reflect on how I see things happening in the Diocese of Madison.
Okay.
First of all, I have given this as much consideration as I've been able to in the last few days. I still have not seen an English translation that was confirmed as trustworthy of this whole matter, so I've been working from the Italian and doing my best with that. But it seems to me that there are many reasons which are listed in that number 14
right,
for asking for the more brief process. And that's what those are. Those are not new grounds for a declaration of nullity. Those are reasons that justify asking for the process, the brevior processus.
Just so I can bring the audience up to speed so they know what we're talking about, there is an Article 14 in the document. The canonist Ed Peters has pointed them out, and he says this could lead people to think that their marriages are null right now, because some of those grounds include if you've had an abortion, a lack of faith, yes, the brevity of the marriage. Are these really appropriate grounds for seeking nullity?
Well, evidently, the conviction is that if these grounds, well, I don't want to call them grounds, but if these reasons exist, what they justify is asking for a shorter process.
Okay.
They don't in themselves justify the declaration of nullity, and I want to be really clear about that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's going to be very hard to keep our people clear about a lot of this, because in many ways the complexity of this lends itself to confusion among a people who are already terribly confused. But I think that with regard to the shorter process, what happens is that someone requests that shorter process, and then the tribunal basically examines the reasons given for the shorter process.
Okay.
And they make a judgment about that, and then they make a recommendation to me as to whether the shorter process is warranted or whether it isn't.
And for that to happen,
order for the
Bishop, you need both of the spouses have to be in agreement that they want the annulment. But how do you avoid, I spoke to so many canon lawyers this week, how do you avoid two spouses in collusion who maybe have met better models and say, you know what, let's go get this annulment thing, we'll just tell them we both want it. Then now they get their fast track. They got 45 days. The clock is ticking on you and the diocese. How do you meet that kind of requirement? In 45 days, you can't get a civil divorce in 45 days.
No, well, I don't believe that there is possible a 45-day declaration of nullity. But let me go back to where I was. People come and they present their reasons to the tribunal. The tribunal makes a recommendation to me about whether I should follow the shorter process or not. And they also give me a breakdown of what some of the possible grounds involved are. Now, on the basis of that, then, I have to be morally certain beyond a reasonable doubt, that this marriage is going to prove that a declaration of nullity should be issued. I'm going to have moral certitude of that. If issues about the degree of consent, the full awareness of the meaning of consent, if all of those things come up, those things are very complex to investigate, and you need a number of witnesses.
Right.
And now it says that in certain cases, one witness would be sufficient, but only if the testimony of that witness was so obvious that no one under any circumstances could doubt it. And that usually does not happen.
Right.
So I would see something like that coming to me, and I would think that I would have further questions beyond what could be accomplished in the shorter process. Therefore, I would turn the case over to the judicial vicar for the ordinary process to ensue.
Because you're not a canon lawyer.
So,
I mean, it does put the bishop who isn't a canon lawyer in a tough spot.
Yes. And I don't envision myself having so many almost completely obvious cases coming forward. And the reticence of people to tell the whole truth, of course, is going to be operative as it's always been, and we're going to need certain assertions to be validated.
Bishop,
so
I need to jump in before we run out of time. I've got to ask you this. What do you make of this second hearing being dispensed with? Currently, your tribunal would investigate a situation, a marriage, and they would say, you know what? This marriage was null from the beginning. They issue the certificate of nullity. Now that goes to an automatic review. That second hearing, that automatic review, is now done away with. A good move, or is this going to open up the annulment process to more abuse?
Well, again, the fact that something can be abused doesn't necessarily count against it. The annulment processes in the United States honestly have been abused for many years.
Right.
So this wouldn't be anything new. But if everything is done right in the first instance, for example, in the Diocese of Madison, I have such confidence in my tribunal that I'm not worried that injustice will happen without a second review. I'm not worried about that at all.
But you have time now to interview witnesses and consider all the evidence. That timetable is going to be abbreviated, particularly if people start rushing the diocese with all these requests for fast-pass annulments.
Well, most of those probably will not be able to be accepted. And I'm sorry that the mass media, once again, remember that 45-day business, the number 45 never occurs in the motu proprio.
So where did it come from?
This is something that others, I don't know exactly to say, but it looks as though someone looked at canon law, looked, you have 30 days to do this, you have 15 days to do that. They didn't search any further. They said, well, this must be a 45-day process. But it never says that in the motu proprio, because that's not going to be able to happen.
I want to play some.
And as has been said, you know, anything that involves the intense involvement of the bishop is not going to be able to be done with incredible speed. And Pope Francis said the reason he wants the bishop involved is precisely to ensure the indissolubility of marriage and the upholding of that teaching. And again, I'm very comfortable with being given that responsibility. But if I have that responsibility and I have to arrive at certainty beyond a reasonable doubt, that just is not a quickie.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of canon lawyers I've spoken to this week across the spectrum, laymen and priests, who say, on the one hand, the Pope is saying, we support the indissolubility of marriage, but on the other hand, we can give you an annulment within a 45-day period. This sounds like it is dissoluble. No-fault Catholic divorce is what it sounds like to not only these canonists, but the public at large.
Well, I think that's a hasty conclusion of certain in the mass media, and perhaps even certain canon lawyers. I don't know. But I do know that the motu proprio never mentions 45 days, and I do know that I've been told here by my tribunal that 120 days would be the absolute minimum, if that. Given a realistic look at all of the circumstances surrounding consent that need to be examined.
Bishop, I need to play something for you. This is Cardinal Raymond Burke. He was speaking at Steubenville about the upcoming synod on the family and what he's been seeing in recent days. Listen to this.
One must ask the question whether sentimentalism or a false compassion has inspired the suggestions to modify radically the process for the declaration of nullity of marriage.
Do you see intent there in the minds of some wishing to be merciful, but in the doing maybe unraveling the Church's teaching on marriage?
That could happen, and as I said, that's the sort of thing that's been happening for 50 years in the United States and the tribunals.
Right.
In the name of mercy, in the name of a kind of accommodation to people who can become very pushy and very insistent, the truth has been the casualty. And if that kind of an abuse were to be prevalent as these new stipulations go into effect, as these new regulations go into effect, that would simply be a continuation of what's been the case for 50 years.
Wow. But does
I don't
loosening
want
up,
that.
yeah, does
and
loosening
we're not
up,
going to.
doesn't loosening up the process open itself to more abuse, not less?
It could. It depends on the people. But original sin is alive and well. And again, as the bishop implements this, he's got to be very aware of that. That we can't forget original sin in all of this. We cannot forget the possibility of collusion. At the same time, it is a year of mercy. And at the same time, there are people, there aren't that many cases like this, but there are cases where it would really be good for people's salvation for us to do something more quickly. 45 days, I highly doubt.
Okay.
But I can see mercy being good medicine for those people whose situation begs for it in this sense. But there's nothing in the motu proprio that says that the judicial process for a declaration of nullity is no longer a judicial process.
Okay.
It's rather simply a manifestation of mercy.
Okay.
If it's still a judicial process, we're going to have to be very careful.
Let's move ahead. Just one consideration here before I move on.
Sure.
Were you surprised that the Pope issued these reforms before the Synod on the Family officially meets in October. The thinking in the minds of so many, I think, was that the Pope would issue this following the Synod. Did he in any way change what the Synod on the Family will be discussing, and what are you hearing from bishops? Are they upset by this fast track, if you will?
Well, to be honest, in a few short days, I haven't had that much reflection offered to me back from other bishops. But I personally was surprised, but as I've said many times, at my Episcopal ordination, I twice promised respect and obedience to the successor of Peter. And I will hang in there with that, period.
Okay. Also issued as part of this Year of Mercy, the Pope announced last week that he was going to make some accommodations in what priests could and couldn't do. They could lift the excommunication that an abortion would incur. In the United States, this was widely the practice. Bishops had already delegated their priests to have this power. The Society of St. Pius X, which is a breakaway traditional group, they were given, under the Year of Mercy by Pope Francis, faculties to have licit and valid confessions. Now, just days before this, you had issued a letter in your diocese urging your people to stay away from the Society of St. Pius X because they lacked faculties. Your thoughts on this, and does this in any way change your warning to your people and to people around the country?
Well, let me say something, Raymond, in the name of transparency. In the preparation of that letter, which I prepared because of concrete situations in the diocese.
Right.
I mean, it was not my intention to address the national church, but I know these things can happen. But I was addressing concrete situations. I had asked for several drafts. And as I was going through the drafts and making them my own, I asked that that sentence that said basically, from my point of view, I'd have nothing to do with them. I asked that that sentence be deleted, to tell you the truth. And it didn't get deleted. So at this point, I want to take the opportunity of being on with you to apologize for that sentence. I never meant to say that. And as a matter of fact, I was asked to reissue the document for publication somewhere, and I told them I would only reissue it if I could modify it, and I modified it by removing that language. I have never felt that way about another priestly society, have nothing to do with them. I don't even speak that way. But I take the responsibility for that, but I also apologize for it. I think, as I said in many places in my letter, that these are very fine people trying to act in good faith. However, the truth of the matter is that they do not have jurisdiction from communion with the Pope of the sort that they need. Well, evidently they have some equivalent of that for the Year of Mercy, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, at least where confessions are concerned. I mean, there's still some question whether that licit faculty would extend to Mass and other sacraments. It seems to be just restricted to confession.
Yes, it does. And but it is my hope that Pope Francis said some hopeful words, and it is my hope that there can be a reconciliation there. One of the reasons why I celebrate the extraordinary form here regularly myself is in the hope that there can be reconciliation all around.
Very good. Bishop Robert Morlino, we will leave it there. Thanks so much for the time, and we will check in with you soon.
Thank you so much, Raymond. Always wonderful, and God bless you, your family, and all your wonderful listeners.
You're very kind. Thank you. Bishop Morlino's columns can be found at madisondiocese.org.